Thank you very much for that excellent context now for the next session, where we have the people who actually have to negotiate that most difficult of deals, who are going to be moderated by Senator Tim Wirth. And Senator Tim Wirth has been leading on climate change since 1986, when he took office as Senator. He's continued that work as President of the United Nations Foundation, and has recently been honoured by UNEP as a Champion of the Earth by the United Nations Environment Programme. Tim.
Great, Steve. Thank you very much. It's in the New York Public Library. Thank you. It's my job to moderate this brief panel, who will be asked to talk very briefly on what they think the markers of success in Copenhagen should be. These are four of the most important people, as you know, in all of this negotiation. The chair, Connie Hedegaard, who will be from Denmark, as the Danes have done such a terrific job of bringing the world together. And then, of course, the three biggest polluters, the United States, China, and India, are represented here today. But before getting to ask them to comment on the measures of success, Mr. Secretary General, factually wrong, all right? Or potentially the greatest. Let me say, Mr. Secretary General, I think that it's fair to say the job that you have done has been just remarkable at bringing the world together around this, making this such a high priority, and I think we can also say that already Copenhagen has been a success. The science is broadly agreed all across the world through the work of the IPCC. The technology is increasingly well understood as the world agrees that it must move to a low-carbon economy. In the finance world, the opportunities in finance, the engagement of the private sector is growing all the time. Nick Stern is here, McKinsey & Company, some of the very, very fine work that's been done around the world. And there's certainly, as we've been reminded by a number of comments, including the Prime Minister's, the issue of climate justice drives a great deal of this. So the world has come together as never before, and we see that coming together by the four panelists here today. I think, as Mr. Blair reminds us, this is not about, as I quote you, not about settling on a fixed percentage, but what are the measures of success that come out of Copenhagen, that we will mark this as a very, very important way station on the way toward a low-carbon economy for the globe. So let me begin by asking Connie Hedegaard, the Minister of Climate and Energy for the country of Denmark. Connie has been all over the world tirelessly over the past number of years and will be chairing the session in Copenhagen. Connie?
Thank you very much, Tim, and also thank you for your kind introduction. Well, I think that Tony Blair already sort of sketched out some of the main elements. We must have a deal where developed countries reduce their emissions. We must have a deal where emerging economies see their interest in delivering actions and pursuing more sustainable pathways, more sustainable growth. And we need a global deal where there must be finance on the table, also to help the poor countries already suffering a lot from the consequences of climate change. Then I will spend the rest of my 2 minutes here to ask the question, why is it so imperative that we make the deal now in Copenhagen this year? As a former journalist, I know that sometimes you really need a deadline to be kept to get things done. And it's important to get it done now because the world has been waiting and talking for long enough. It's important because the longer we postpone decisions, the more severe the consequences. And it's important because the longer we hesitate to do the necessary, the more expensive the bill that we pass on to future generations. And then one more thing. It is doable. We can sign up this year. We can make the political deal. And to those who still believe, well, isn't it going to be a bit expensive? I will say no. This is the only thing we actually can afford. It is not a cost to invest in the climate. It is an investment. It is an investment in a safer and less energy-consuming future in new infrastructure and in millions of new jobs. Can I just end up mentioning one example? Last year, a report argued that a US energy efficiency program could cut energy demand by a fourth, reduce greenhouse gases by a fifth, and save at the same time $1,200 billion by the year 2020. We can do it. Political leadership is paramount to success in Copenhagen. Governments must come to Copenhagen with clear mandates and the courage to seal the deal. Remember, we can press the undo button if the climate gets out of hand. The window of opportunity will soon be closing. Let us get the job done now. Let us get started. Let us use the opportunity. We cannot afford to waste it, and it is doable. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Todd Stern is the U.S. Special Envoy for Climate Change, having been appointed by the President in January of 2009. He previously was assistant to President Clinton and the staff secretary in the White House. Todd, give us your picture on how rapidly we can reach Connie's dream and what are some of the markers that we ought to look for between now and the end of the Copenhagen process.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for everybody else, Paul Leclerc, Steve Howard, Hugh Jackman, and many others who've made this event possible, and especially to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Tony Blair, Connie, Tim Wirth, who have shown such exceptional leadership on this issue for years. I'm also very pleased to be joined by distinguished representatives from India and China, my friends Jairam Ramesh and Su Wei. I've had the opportunity to work with them throughout the year and had the opportunity to travel to both of their countries with Secretary Clinton. And I must say I came away with a deep appreciation for all of the things that are already being done and that are being planned to be done in both India and China to promote clean energy and combat climate change. As everybody has noted already, as we gather today, this is a momentous time. We're 77 days away from the convening of the nations of the world in Copenhagen in the hope of taking an important step forward in the fight against global climate change, and we need to seize that opportunity and make the most of it. To date, I think if we are honest about it, we must acknowledge that progress in the negotiations has been slower than we would like. We need to change that dynamic, and we can. So long as all of us do our part. Developed countries who, like the United States, are the dominant historic emitters of greenhouse gases, the major developing countries who are the largest, are going to be the largest emitters going forward, and the numerous smaller developing countries whose key contribution now should be to develop low-carbon growth plans so they can develop low-carbon economies with financial and technological assistance by developed countries. It is in everyone's interest that we do this. The task before us is not simply to limit emissions, but to agree on the steps needed to allow the nations of the world to grow, develop, and overcome poverty during the next several decades, but to do it in a way that doesn't endanger the planet. If we are smart, we can do this while creating enormous economic opportunity as we transform the energy base of the global economy. So our mission now has to be, in the next 77 days, to go full speed ahead to Copenhagen, to be pragmatic, flexible, respect each other's legitimate constraints, and as Tony Blair said, and as Connie said, and as I completely agree with, to get started. We cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can do this. Above all, we need to get started. The world is watching, and we need to join together and deliver. Thanks.